I am absolutely delighted to welcome you all to our reunion event today. It's wonderful to quote unquote see you, how I wish this were all in person, but it's really wonderful to get together anyway. I thought I'd kick this event off by giving you a presentation on the state of the school. Obviously, a lot has happened in the last year, and I thought I'd update you on that. And so let's get this started. Can we go to the next slide, please? All right, so first, a bunch of information about our school at a glance. So if you look at enrollments in the school, we've got about 4,000 undergraduates, almost 2,300 graduate students, including our Masters Online, which are about 446. And in fact, the numbers are growing. There's been very healthy growth. And so the school's getting to be, fairly big at this point. We're awarding a lot of degrees, more than 1,000 undergraduate degrees this year, 662 masters, 177 PhD, almost one PhD per faculty member in the school, which is really a really good number for any school in engineering. It's one that I'm really proud of. We've been growing our faculty, as many of you know. We started off 5 years ago with 167 faculty. Now we've already grown to 192, and we'll continue growing. We're supported by a wonderful staff of 176 full-time staffers. So we are getting to be a pretty substantial, quite large engineering school at this point. Next slide. All right, so, I've given you reports like this before, but the trend continues. We've had a huge number of applications this year, 31,373, all right? And this is way higher than we've ever gotten before the pandemic. We used to come in at about 26,000. This year, there's been a much larger number of applications. Again, we continue to get extraordinarily good students, median weighted GPA, 4.56. Now, I used to report ACT and SAT scores. We do not take them into account anymore. Certainly didn't last year and will not going forward. Nevertheless, our students are absolutely phenomenal. We offered admission to 2,500-ish students. Our acceptance rate now is about 8% in the school. We're intended to take 775 students. We ended up at 932 only because our yield has really gone through the roof. Our yield has really gone through the roof, particularly for California residents, but really all across the board. And so the school continues to be extremely and highly sought after. What's wonderful is that dropping the SAT and ACT seems to have had the effect of encouraging a lot of people to apply who would not otherwise apply. And so this fall, if the trends hold, we're going to be 35.5% women. These are the SIRs that have come in. Just to give you a context, we typically come in about 30% women. 5 years ago, 2015, we used to be about 23% women in the freshman class. And so those numbers have really, really gone up. For our underrepresented students, we typically come in, at 9-10%. And this year we're almost 16%, which is again, a phenomenal trend. 13% of our students are international. So, so dropping SAT, ACT has done something. I really look forward to seeing how this whole extremely diverse class evolves as it goes through our curriculum. Very exciting. Next slide. All right, so many of you know that we are in a period of growth. And so I wanted to report out a little bit on how that's going. What you see here is undergraduate enrollment versus time, right? And the blue line that you see was really what we were planning, all right? So we started off at something like, 3,100, something like 3,200-ish undergraduates. And we wanted to end up at 3,805 in steady state. Instead, we're kind of hitting a steady state that is quite a bit higher. And the reason for it simply is that our yields have really gone through. So many of our models predicting how many students we're actually going to get have changed quite radically in recent years. And certainly in the last year, it's become really quite unpredictable. So the numbers have been, so we're getting a lot more people saying yes to us than we used to before, which is something to be proud of. And in a way, it's good that we're admitting people, but it does mean that our steady state numbers have really gone up, right? So we ended up with a larger undergraduate class in steady state than we had originally planned. Right. Next slide. Right now, our graduate growth also continues. And so if you look at our graduate enrollment, now we've got roughly 2,200-ish graduate students in 2020, 2021. And you can see that we've got fair number of graduate students, domestic, of course, but international is quite large. And then if you look at race and ethnicity, you see the distribution that you see up top with respect to, so the demographics are that we've got a large percentage of Asian and white Caucasian students and smaller numbers elsewhere. So there is an issue of diversity here that we've got to be looking at. If you look at the evolution in time, I'll tell you more about this as we go on. The pandemic did hit us. You don't quite see it in these numbers. We had a lot of deferrals into this year from last year, from 2021, from 2020 to 2021. However, if you look at the distribution of master's and PhD students, it's roughly half and half. And that's a pretty unusual thing in many schools. I mean, you typically have a lot more masters and PhDs, and we've got a pretty even distribution. It tells you something about the strength of our research enterprise. Now, next slide. Right now, here we are. I mean, this, the fall quarter hasn't opened yet, of course. So we are in SIR land. So we have predictions about who's going to show up. There's a lot of data on the slide, and I don't know that I want to go through all of it. Up at the top, you will see the three graphs. If you look at the top row, it's applications, admits, and intent to register. And so we had an uptick in applications. We admitted a lot of students. And last year, we had a drop off, as you can see, the fall in intent to register because of COVID. Not seeing that this year. All right, so intent to register is very healthy. But we'll have to see how all of this works out for September with the Delta variant and international travel and so on. And similarly, if you look at the bottom row, you'll see gender in terms of applications, admits, and intent to register. Now, overall, women are about 26% of our graduate class in terms of intent to register. Intent to register is very healthy. Let's see how this whole COVID thing plays out this year. So next slide. Here's a report on our Masters Online program, which is the set of graphs that you see on the left-hand side. This is enrollment in MSOL, starting from fall 2014 into fall 2020. And you can actually see, very healthy growth. We have increased the size of the program by more than 50%. That growth continues this year too. We're going to have a very healthy class coming in fall 2021. So we continue to be number one or number two by US News and World Report. And so that class is doing really well. Now, some of you know that we've started a new program called a Master of Engineering, and that's due to kick off this fall. Now, this is a fully on-campus program, and it's unique because it combines two things. It combines technical depth with management expertise, and so that's a new thing that we're doing. There is a fall cohort of, I believe, 46 students in really cutting edge areas such as AI, autonomous systems, data science, green energy systems. And so that's a new program, right? And this is an on-campus program. Again, a little bit tangled up with COVID, but right now it looks like we're going to go straight ahead. There's lots of interest. We're very excited to kick this new program off. Right? Next slide. All right, so how are we doing on the rankings? We're doing well, right? There's a lot of information here as well. Of course, how you do in the rankings depends on which ranking you're actually looking at. And so if you look at Times Higher Ed, we are ranked as the #2 US public, #7 overall, #11 in the world. And computer science similarly is ranked really high, #3 US public, #9 overall, US overall, #16 in the world. US News and World Report ranks us #10 as an undergraduate public and #9 as in the graduate program in the publics. And so that's been relatively stable, but Times Higher Ed has been really pushing us up these past few years. So we're doing very well by their lights. Masters Online this year is #2. We come in either #1 or #2. It flips around depending on the year. Similarly, QS World rankings are really good for the school as well. UCLA continues to do phenomenally well and actually in a very stable way. I mean, we've been ranked the #1 public university by US News and World Report for many years now, and #2 by Times Higher Ed, ARWU, and so on, right? So overall, I got a report that things are really positive. UCLA and UCLA Engineering are doing really phenomenally well. All right, next slide. Right. So what else is going on, right? So COVID obviously has been an issue and difficult for everybody, difficult for our students particularly, difficult for our faculty. And we're hopeful that it's all coming to an end and we can get back to some level of normalcy. Now, commencement this year had to be virtual. And so we offered a virtual commencement ceremony. And parents in our audience, I hope you had a chance to see that. In addition, we actually did an engineering only in-person recognition event in Drake Stadium. And a lot of people showed up there as well. Now, we're still looking at bringing people back for an in-person commencement, thinking of it for this fall in Royce Hall. So the class of 2020 and the class of 2021 will be welcomed in fall 2021 and over different weekends. And we will actually do a graduate pudding on November 19th and 20th for the class of 2020 and for the class of 2021. So this is evolving, but we are planning a set of physical events in fall to bring back students from our previous batches to do a set of in-person ceremonies. So we'll keep you posted as this evolves. Right. Next slide. For those of you who actually looked at our virtual commencement, it was a really fun thing. Our commencement speaker this year was Megan MacArthur, class of 93 from Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering. She is a NASA astronaut. She was the pilot for the SpaceX Crew 2 mission. Absolutely fun. I mean, I actually went to see the liftoff. It was a phenomenal event. I mean, it was beautiful. So she is currently aboard the International Space Station. She recorded her speech while she was up there, and she did an in-flight interview with 2 of our students. We're all still walking on air from that interview. It was just completely phenomenal. We just loved it, and she was so. It was so good because she's a busy person up there. They don't have a lot of time to goof off, and so her taking the time to actually do this was enormously appreciated. Next slide. All right, so what's going on summer and fall? Summer is all remote, and it's just as well given all the uncertainties. Fall 2021, we are hoping to do largely in-person learning. It's expected that 80% of the courses and labs will all be in person. So most students will see some part of their curriculum taught in person this fall. Faculty will be back. We're still trying to sort out remote work for our employees. So those plans are developing. It's expected that there will be some level of remote work. Now, you may have seen the announcement from the Office of the President, from the University of California Office of the President, that other than for exceptional cases, medical exceptions and other things, religious exceptions, faculty and staff and students are expected to be vaccinated. And in fact, it's not true that the codicil that you see there is no longer true. It used to be that we were going to wait for FDA approval. That is in fact not the case. Given EUA, everybody is expected to be vaccinated to come back on campus. Right. So that's the expectation. Some of our larger classes, for example, in computer science, will continue to be remote because there are limits on how many students we can seat in classrooms. And there will be guidance evolving, of course. As you can see, it's a very fluid situation, but our expectation is we will be back for the most part in person as things stand. Right. Next slide. All right, so given all the difficulties of COVID and all the stress that it's put on everybody, I got to say this has been an absolutely stellar year for faculty recognition. I mean, just so many good things that have happened. It's almost unbelievable. Top of the list is the Carbon X Prize. All right, the NRG CUSIA Carbon X Prize, a grand prize of $7.5 million. Won by our own professor in civil engineering, Gaurav Sant, and his team. And what's really unique about this is this has never been won by a university team. Typically, it's companies that put teams together. It's very hard to do in an academic setup. But I honestly don't know how Gaurav pulled it off. Absolutely phenomenal win. We're so proud. Lots of other recognitions, as you can see. I don't even know if I have the time to go through all the level of these things. One high level stuff: Time Magazine recognitions, inductions into the National Academy of Inventors, a Guggenheim Fellowship, the Bronze Star from the US Army, whole slew of NSF Career Awards. And I can't begin to tell you how impressive this is, because Career Awards are not easy to win. They're one of the highest recognitions that a young person can get, a junior faculty member. And we won a whole pile of them last year. So that's something else. NIH Awards, Simons Investigator Award for Professor Sahai, Sloan Foundation Fellows. I mean, these are high awards. And, I'm looking at these and thinking, wow, we've got a really good setup going here. Lots of absolutely talented young people, absolutely talented old people for that matter. Really good stuff. All right, next slide. All right, so where are we in terms of our infrastructure updates? Some of you will know that, our new building, right? Engineering 6, off and running. We've been using it very, very happily these last couple of years. The upstairs floor, the 5th floor, was shell space, and we decided to build it out. And most of that space has been built out to be wet labs, high quality, modern wet labs, which we desperately needed because of our faculty expansion. That is basically done. It's looking really spiffy, and we will start moving faculty in as we hire them, and as our need for wet lab space, it's been pretty acute, and so I'm really, really happy to have this new space available. Next slide. All right, now, one of the things that we've been doing right through COVID is to focus on equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so there's a whole slew of initiatives that we've kicked off, and these are really important to the school. I can't begin to tell you, how delighted I am that we've been working on this even through COVID. And so let's go to the next slide. Right, you might want to hit return here, Gustavo, and just bring up all the points. Yeah. All right. So let me sort of walk through the things that we've been doing. Right. So we've established a standing committee on diversity to look at diversity across the school. and to push diversity initiatives. It's a good committee. It's got all our different constituencies represented so that they can have a voice. I've decided to put a very significant endowment behind our Center for Excellence in Engineering and Diversity from our existing endowment commitments. This will support scholarships, this will support students, and it's the right thing to do. I want to acknowledge one of our alumni, Joanne McGuire. She endowed a chair for our mentor professor program, which is a program we've developed to hire faculty to support our underrepresented students. And we've kicked off a new math achievement program to build a pipeline of students from LAUSD into our undergraduate program. This is supported through a wonderful philanthropic gift of $1.2 million from one of our alumni. Very, very grateful for that. A big push in the area of faculty hiring. As I mentioned, we have a mentor professor program. The mentor professor program is a new thing that we put in place. And the intent here is really to hire faculty who are, of course, phenomenal teachers and researchers. We don't ever hire anybody else. But what's special about these faculty is that they are committed and have a track record of mentoring our underrepresented students, right? And so they've done stuff in that space. They've created programs. They've been incredibly supportive. And through these programs of our underrepresented students, we hired 3 faculty members under this program. And that's a huge success. I mean, I'm really proud that we were able to pull that off. Another area in which we've been hiring is a new program that UCLA has kicked off called Rising to the Challenge. They had a number of faculty positions available. We bid for one of them with the Luskin School of Public Policy and hired a person, again, a phenomenal win for us in the area of transportation equity. So this is a joint appointment between the Bunch Center for African American Studies, the Luskin School of Public Policy, and our school, looking at the intersection of engineering and public policy with an eye to equity, right? So really interesting area of work, picking up at the federal level as well. We just got a bunch of information today on how these programs are going to expand. So we were, ahead of the curve here. All right, next slide. Again, yeah, thank you. New programs in undergraduate and graduate retention and recruitment. Now, you are aware, of course, that the University of California system dropped SAT and ACT scores in our freshman admission process. So we've been rethinking the entire admission process. The fall 2021 class was hired under the new process. Now, at the graduate level, GRE requirements have been relaxed in our departments. We are developing, as I said, a math achievement program working with LAUSD schools. This is actually a very ambitious program that we're kicking off. What it is that we plan to bring in students through 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, not just in the summer, but every Saturday through the academic year, with the idea that we're going to really improve our students' math skills and also to inculcate an interest in engineering. Right? It takes a lot of commitment on the part of the students, a lot of commitment on the part of the instructors that we're pulling together. But the idea is really that we would be developing a strong pipeline of well-prepared students from LAUSD to enter our undergraduate curriculum. We've got a very demanding curriculum in engineering, and we're trying to make sure that we get a pipeline of people or students who can be successful in it. Other things we're doing, there's an awareness to action program that we put together to improve climate for women, for underrepresented students. Right. So here's some more information on the awareness to action program. So what it is that it's got 2 parts in it. One addressing gender inclusivity, the other on racial inclusivity, and increasing awareness generally of challenges to our underrepresented students. It's often running. Lots of students have been taking part in it. and we will continue to deploy it. All right, so next slide. Again, I've described our math achievement program already. So this is being operated by our Center for Excellence in Engineering and Diversity and SEED, with the idea that we're going to address and improve math deficiencies for underrepresented students from our local school districts and get them interested in STEM and get them excited about STEM. And so that's off and running. We thought we would kick it off this fall, but I think COVID is going to complicate that, particularly because of issues of vaccination and so on for our young students. These are high school students. And so right now it's looking like we're going to kick this off in the winter quarter of 2022. But again, things are fluid. We'll see how COVID evolves and come to a decision sometime this fall about timing. Nevertheless, I want to say that this is a very ambitious program. If we can make it work out, it's going to be truly phenomenal. Next slide. Right, here's our slide on the mentor professors that we've hired. Three wonderful faculty members. The first is Sergio Carbajo. He is going to join our ECE department. He is out of Stanford, out of SLAC at Stanford. Doing really exciting work out there. Reagan Patterson will join our civil engineering department. She's actually one of ours. She's actually a SEED alumna, chemical engineering alumna out of our own school, working on air quality issues associated with traffic and the impact on underserved communities, a really important area, particularly in LA. Taisha Wright will join our chemical and she will join our chemical and biomolecular engineering department. There's a little mistake there. Doing really good work on the kinetics and thermodynamics of polymer bioconjugates. Sergio is already here. Reagan and Taisha will be joining us sometime next year, I believe. Right. Next slide. All right. So that brings me to the end of our update. I can't begin to tell you. I never actually get to see the whole school, looked at from a high level to understand what we achieved the last year. And when I make these presentations, it suddenly hits me how phenomenal a school we've got, right? And I can't begin to tell you how proud I am. Wonderful students, wonderful faculty, wonderful staff. So proud to be the dean of the school. So with that, let me hand this off to Professor Jenny J, who will now be Master of Ceremonies. Going forward, she is a professor in civil and environmental engineering. Take it away, Jenny.
Thank you, Dean Murthy. There was so much exciting news in that update. It is such a pleasure being part of this year's Bruin Engineers Reunion. As UCLA Samueli School of Engineering celebrates its 75th anniversary of our first graduating class, we decided it would be appropriate to also look toward the future at our school. Faculty members from each of our school's departments will give a short presentation on what's to come in the future through the lens of their research. After the presentations, we will have a Q&A session, so you have a chance to ask our faculty about their presentations. If you have a question, please submit it using the chats. You can direct message to one of the choices, which is Reunion Q&A. Our staff will pick one question per faculty member, which I will ask. Without further ado, let's start with our first faculty member presenting today. Sanjay Mohanty is an assistant professor of civil and environmental engineering, and he specializes in environmental engineering. His group mainly examines the effects of anthropogenic and natural stressors, such as compaction, excess pollutant loading, wildfire, drying, freezing, and flooding on the biogeochemical processes in subsurface soil. His group works with federal, state, and local agencies to further these research agendas, and the research informs policies related to managing soil and water resources. Fun fact, growing up as a farmer in a remote place in India, Sanjay never imagined or expected to study beyond high school. He actually wanted to serve in the army after high school, but he was rejected 5 times by the army. And today he's thankful that he was rejected. Otherwise, he wouldn't be here at UCLA doing what he loves, playing with soil and cleaning dirty water. And lucky for UCLA that he's here. Welcome, Sanjay.
Thank you, Jenny, for introductions. Yes, I really think I can be, I'm the luckiest person in the world to be here, let alone, I always thought of UCLA, as a dream school, but never thought that I'll come here as a faculty. And I must say that I applied here for PhD. I was rejected, so that you can understand how good it is. And I'm going to share my slides a few seconds. Yes, as Jenny mentioned, that I work on subsurface soil. For many of you, that's basically few feet of soil layer beneath our feet. And something that we fail to appreciate many times, because what it does, it helps clean our groundwater, the natural water that you always drinks. It also exchanges air, oxygens, and it supports the plants. It exchanges many elements that supports the life system on Earth. So what I do is I try to understand how different processes work in the soil, and we use that process to design the engineering system such a way that most of the systems are resilient under climate change. So I will talk today about one of those systems, roadways. So as I said, growing up, I always play with soil and water, and I keep doing the same thing as a faculty. And one of the things is how to design roads. And now you'd think that what environmental engineers do for designing road. Well, let me explain a little bit more. As you can see now, when you think of roads, this is what pictures comes to your mind. And if you are from LA, it comes across as if, crowded, very, very, congested traffic. And as we grow, the more traffic will come and city is going to expand. In the sense the roads are going to be expanding to accommodate more cars. But it has many consequences. First, we don't have space. We need space for many other things, not just driving. And also, roads have, even though they connect us and drive our economy, it has many consequences, particularly pollutions. So every time you drive car or any other systems, it leaves behind these oils and other pollutants. So every time it rains, it washes off and it pollutes our surface water. Some of them leak into groundwater. That's how we get our polluted groundwater. But more importantly, it prevents any kind of natural recharge of groundwater. And we know that this is middle of drought and we don't have much water. So this is very relevant that when we design roads, we do not think of just roadways. We have to think of water. We have to think of energy. And that's what my research, part of my research is how to do it. So this one picture explains how we can do it. So as you see the roads on the left side, now that's we drive car. And because to design this road, the roads or the soils around the roads has to be compacted. So when we do that, it prevents any kind of natural infiltrations. And so most of the stormwater wash off all the pollutants and pollute our surface water. That's the blue line. So what we do is we change that soil, roadside soil, into different materials, natural and engineering materials, so that it increases the infiltration. That's the white arrows. And so that means we have more groundwater, and it is less pollutions, because as it moves through, it can remove pollutants. So what's unique of this one is we can use solar panel to recharge that pollutions, in the sense that all the pollutants that accumulate, we can use the natures to degrade them using small amount of current. And what next thing is that those solar panels can actually support these connecting power grids that could recharge our car. Many of the electric cars, it's going to increase. So we are looking at this integrated system that not only help people drive, but also clean water, also provide energy. So that's the futures that we're looking at. So next time when you drive a road, you might think that this is not just a driving space. It is also our source of water. It is also a source of energy. So that's all, and I'm very happy to be here and excited to be part of this meeting, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Sanjay. Next up is Samanvai Srivastav, an assistant professor in the Department of Chemical. In the Department of Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering. His research interests are in understanding the influence of intermolecular interactions on material structure and properties, with a broader aim to combine this fundamental understanding with molecular engineering and self-assembly processes to improve materials design. Fun fact, he is part of a really great cohort of young faculty in his department. The group hangs out a lot, just like a cohort of grad students. They even continue to meet outside throughout the pandemic. Welcome, Samanvai.
Thank you, Jenny. Let me just share my screen quickly. Let's see. Okay, so you guys can see my screen? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. What I'm choosing to do today is to give you an overview of where chemical engineering as a discipline and our department in particular is going in the next few years. And the reason why we wanted to do this was because we thought that, as Jenny mentioned, we have a very good cohort of assistant professors in our department. Right now, we have 7 assistant professors. As Dean Murthy mentioned, the school has undergone an expansion, and our department has definitely benefited from that. We've hired many faculty members in the past couple of years who are taking our department into new areas, new research areas, as well as enhancing the teaching portfolio of our department. So we all sat down together and thought that what we wanted to talk to you about today was collectively where chemical and biomolecular engineering department is going in terms of our research in the next few years. So when you think of traditional chemical engineering, you think about operators sitting in front of huge panels of controllers and switches. You think of people in hazmat suits working with reactors, and you think of big refineries, something like what we have here near the airport as well. So this is what traditional chemical engineering, sorry, somehow I lost, let me see. So traditional chemical engineering is associated with industry and sorry, plants and pipes and tubes and reactors and so on. But as we all know, times are changing, and we all have to adapt to those times. So in terms of a discipline that is trying to address changes in our current environment, in how we are trying to address our energy sourcing requirements as well as our energy consumption requirements, and how does that interact with our surroundings, and how we are evolving to address challenges around climate change in particular, and also having a sustainable methodology for producing and consuming materials and energy is a big push in chemical engineering as of now. So the way we are going to do, the way we are going about it is to develop an understanding going all the way from systems down to the atomic and the molecular scale, and then going all the way back up from the atomic and molecular scale to engineer new aid solutions that for materials and for energy requirements, or that can excuse me, that can cater to the needs of the evolving world. Right? So in our department, we have about 19 faculty members. who specialize in different areas of chemical engineering, in energy and environment, in nanoengineering, in biomolecular engineering, in process system engineering. And what I'm going to tell you very briefly are a few of the exciting projects that we're working on, where we are working on developing new kind of photovoltaics, which have higher efficiency and of converting solar energy into electrical energy. At the same time, there is significant research going on in the department on coming up with new and better ways to capture carbon dioxide from the environment and convert it into useful materials. It's one thing to convert energy. It's another very important aspect is to store that energy. So there is a lot of research going on in our department on developing better batteries that can store energy for longer and can be cycled for consistently for longer and longer durations. There's also a significant effort in our department on coming up with newer ways to recycle existing plastic as well as redesign plastics from the bottom up, so that we can create materials that can degrade over time by themselves, and you don't have to really worry about recycling them. And then we are also working on biomolecular engineering, where we are working with some of my colleagues are working on producing better biosensors and better molecules by using microbes that can allow us to create materials that are not possible through traditional chemical engineering routes. And then one avenue where we're interfacing still with the traditional chemical industries, but looking at new age challenges is in process system engineering, where we are looking, some of my colleagues are looking at how we can safeguard our existing chemical plants against the increasing threat of cyber terrorism and hacking, and make sure that they can operate in a safe and reliable manner. So with that, I would be happy to answer questions about any of these areas that our department is working in, and happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Samanbhai. Next up is Omid Abari from the Department of Computer Science. Omid is an assistant professor of CS, and he leads the Intelligent Connectivity, ICON, research group. His research interests are in all aspects of Internet of Things, networks and systems, from the physical layer to the application layer. His research group, His research group develops software hardware systems that deliver ubiquitous sensing, efficient computing, and wireless communication at scale. Omid's fun fact happened at his first conference presentation, which was in front of 500 people. He had told his supervisor that he would sing in the middle of his presentation, and of course she thought he was joking. Well, he actually did it, and everyone, including her, laughed. While I think he should go for an encore here tonight, he has said he's not going to sing for us. Welcome, Omid.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Yes, I promise not to embarrass the whole UCLA tonight. So I'm very excited to be here today and talk about some of the research my group is doing. So here I'm showing you a device, which I'm sure many of you have seen it. It's called RFID tags. And in fact, we have seen it in library that is attached to the books to track and basically identify different books. They're also used in warehouses when they are attached to different items to localize the lost items and also track different items in different parts of these warehouses. And they come in different shapes. We have seen different shapes. But why I'm very interested in these devices? There are multiple reasons. First of all, they are low cost. So each of these tags, they cost only a few cents. So they are great. Second, they are battery free. They are the only probably wireless device that we use today that they don't require any battery, and still they can send their ID wirelessly. And finally, they are flexible, they are waterproof. So I can bend them and nothing happens to them. So what do I do in my research? So in one of our projects, we look at these RFID tags that they are traditionally used as identification tags, and see how we can transform these RFID tags to ubiquitous sensors, to a sensor that can sense temperature, it can sense light, and it can sense even moisture level. Why I'm so excited about this? Because if I can do that, then these are very low cost, battery-free, flexible sensors that I can just put it in different environment and enable a smart environment and digital environment. But how do we do that? So if you look at the RFID system, it has two parts. It has the RFID reader, and it has one or multiple tags. And the way they are working, remember, these tags don't have a battery. So the way they are working, the reader transmits some signal toward the tag, and the tag is receiving this signal and try to harvest energy from them. And once they harvested enough energy, they wake up and they respond their ID back to the reader. And they do that with a very, very simple approach. So either they are reflecting the reader's signal back, or they are just absorbing it. And by doing this absorption versus reflection, they can send their ID back to the reader by just 0 and 1. So we found out that if we look at this reflected signal, which is coming from the tag, not only we can decode their ID, but also we can extract some minor feature from that signals. And by designing algorithm that can look at those minor features, we were able to sense the temperature, moisture of the air around that tags. And this is exactly how we transform RFID tags to ubiquitous sensors that they can sense temperature, moisture, and light intensity. So I'm very excited to share with you that we have recently deployed our technology in a greenhouse. As you can see, this is one of the largest greenhouse in North America. So each plant is equipped with a RFID tag. These are off-the-shelf RFID tags. And we have installed a RFID reader on top of a greenhouse that can move and scan the whole greenhouse. And we were able in real time measure the moisture level, light intensity, and temperature around each pot, and provide this information to our algorithm that can adjust the environment based on that and make the greenhouses much more greener. So I'm excited about this application, but I believe this technology has many, many other applications that we are going to work on that. And I'm looking forward to hear some of these applications also from the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Omid. Next up, we have Jun Chen, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Bioengineering. His current research focuses on nanotechnology and bioelectronics for energy, sensing, and therapy applications in the form of smart textiles, wearables, and body area sensor networks. Fun fact, he drove all the way from Atlanta to Stanford by himself in 2016. Take it away.
Okay, thank you very much for Jenny's kind introduction, and thank you everyone for having me here to show my recent research with the title, The Future of Textiles. So look at this sketch. Actually, our human beings have a long history with textiles. The textile products are an indispensable component of our daily life. So the conventional textile is protecting our body from an environmental hazard and also keeping our body warm. So with the rapid advancement of bioelectronics and nanotechnology, now it's time for us to add some additional value to the conventional textile to make them smart. So actually textiles could be used for energy harvesting. For example, here is one piece of triple electric textile, which is able to convert the body biomechanical motion into electricity. And here's another wearable photovoltaic textile is able to convert solar radiation into electricity. So in the future, when you wear your backpack and work under sunshine and go to work, so this kind of energy could be harnessed and to charge your cell phone or some other small electronics. Actually, textile could not only be applied to harvest energy from the biomechanical motion and solar radiation. Actually, textile could also be utilized to harvest energy from body heat and biochemicals, for example, perspiration. So beyond the capability of harvest energy for ambient environment, actually textile could also for healthcare purpose, So here I specially prepared two videos to visualize the application. So the first one is a text sensor, which will apply to continuously long-invasively measure the pulse wave. So here is a video. So here is a text sensor. You can see the blue west, so west band. So you can see your pulse wave profile can be timely and continually displayed on the desktop. So if there are some abnormalities, you can notify this kind of melody to a doctor over distance by using a phone call or text message or email, then they will give you a timely treatment. So here is another demonstration. We developed a text gloves as the assistive physical therapy, which could apply to wearable sound-to-speech translation. So look at the video here.
I L Y I love you.
So actually, you can see this kind of wearable sound-to-speech translation system could promote the communication between sender and unsenders. Actually, in the future, we can take the clothes or substrate to deploy different type of text sensors on text therapeutic devices to form a text body area network. I think in the future, I foresee that we can wear certain type of clothes and a certain type of disease and will be diagnosed and also be treated. I do believe this concept will conquer the medical field in the area of Internet of Things. So thank you very much for your attention. So if you have any question regarding my presentation today, please shoot me an email. So if you are interested in my research, so you can Google my name with UCLA and to find more details. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, June. Next, we have Clarice Aiello, an assistant professor in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering. She's a quantum engineer interested in how quantum physics inform biology at the nanoscale. She's an expert on nanosensors harnessing room temperature quantum effects in noisy environments. And her fun fact is when she was organizing her research group's office, she realized if she wasn't an engineer, she would be an interior designer. Welcome, Clarice.
Thank you, Jennifer, and hello there. I hope we can meet brewing to brewing in the near future soon. As Jenny said, I like to call myself a quantum engineer. This means that I build apparatuses to study and control things that are so small and so well protected from their environment that they're better described by the laws of quantum mechanics as opposed to the laws of classical mechanics that rule everything big around us. You can actually prove that if you use a quantum object as a sensor, your measurement is improved. In other words, the sensor quantumness enhances the measurement. Now, it's very interesting because there's partial evidence that quantum objects in biology might, for a very short time, also be behaving as a quantum sensor, or in this case, as a living quantum sensor. If that's truly so, I think that there's a lot of room for us to take high-tech setups employed in the fields of quantum mechanics, quantum sensing, quantum computing, and applying those high-tech setups to study those living quantum sensors. So what we want actually is to be able to tune those apparently endogenous quantum degrees of freedom in biological specimens in order to mainly do two things. First of all, we can think about improving technology by doing so. I'm not saying, well, let's replace Google's beautiful quantum computer with a molecule, but we can always ask, can we learn with nature something that would make Google's technology work better, right? Because if nature really is using quantum mechanical degrees of freedom to function, it knows damn well how to deal with noise. The other thing that we want to do by controlling those degrees of freedoms is we would like to systematize the knowledge of whether it's possible to sort of drive macroscopic physiological phenomena by tapping on those tiny, short-lived degrees of freedom. This work is within the field, the emerging field of quantum biology, And last but not least, I'm delighted to say that with the support of NSF, the Moore, the Kavli, the Science Foundations, and CNSI, the California Nanosystems Institute at UCLA, we're going in a couple of weeks be launching the first US-based quantum biology center, of which I'll be a director. So that's all I wanted to share with you today, and may the quantum be with you.
Thank you, Clarice. Next, we have Daniel Tward. Daniel Tward is an assistant professor in the Department of Computational Medicine and Neurology. Daniel's research uses imaging data to understand how disease affects the brain structure. He develops and applies computational tools that overcome challenges in neuroimaging, such as the wide range of imaging technologies producing data and the complex geometry of the brain's anatomy. He holds a joint appointment in the Department of Neurology as part of the Amundsen Lovelace Brain Mapping Center and in the Department of Computational Medicine. His fun fact is that since starting his job here at UCLA in April 2020, he has never actually worked on campus, but he says he's been made to feel very welcome regardless. Welcome, Daniel.
Thanks very much for the introduction. Today, I'm going to tell you for a few minutes about how the Department of Computational Medicine is contributing to the future of medicine. Now, when we think of breakthroughs in medicine, we usually think of biological discoveries like insulin or penicillin. These were classic 20th century discoveries. They were remarkable, but they were one size fits all. Doctors didn't need to know anything about you to apply these treatments. You were treated as though you were the average American. But averages don't tell us the whole story. For example, in baseball, you might think a player with a 500 batting average would do well in the playoffs. But if you knew they batted 1,000 in the first half of the season and 0 in the second half, you'd probably change your mind. So the challenges we're facing in modern medicine stem from understanding how you are different from average and leveraging that toward more accurate diagnosis and more effective treatments. Now that means decision-making can't be based on simple yes or no questions like, do you have an infection or do you have diabetes? Decisions need to be based on thousands of related variables, your genetics, your history, and your body's unique and changing anatomy. This task is too big for physicians to handle on their own. In our department, we're building machine learning systems that analyze massive databases of health information while still protecting privacy. This is enabling us to make new discoveries about disease and to improve personalized diagnosis and treatment. My work focuses on studying neurodegenerative disease using medical imaging. In Alzheimer's, for example, it's estimated that over 6 million Americans are suffering from the disease. And as lifespan continues to increase, we expect this number to double by 2050. We all know someone who's been affected, either as a sufferer or as a caregiver, and we know the toll that it takes on our lives. Now, this year, something amazing happened. We finally have an FDA-approved treatment for Alzheimer's. Unfortunately, we still have no way to accurately diagnose the disease in living people. Right now, you can only get a decisive diagnosis at autopsy after you're already dead. That means people receiving the treatment might not even have the disease, and people with the disease might not be able to get the treatment they need. In my work, we're studying terabytes of microscopy images using tissue from people who have died of the disease, which you can see on the right side of my slide here. We're using deep learning to detect every single sick or healthy cell in the brain. The patterns we've identified are being correlated with the structure of aging brains that we observe in living people, which you can see on the left. Now, instead of waiting until you're already dead, these patterns of changing brain anatomy have been used to identify the disease 10 years before any symptoms are reported. These types of discoveries aren't one-size-fits-all approaches, and they can't be identified by one physician on their own. Applying computational techniques like this one to medical practice is allowing us to complement a physician's expert knowledge with data and patterns that are too complex to be studied by a single human. This computational approach to medicine is beginning to provide truly personalized healthcare. Thanks very much for your attention.
Thank you, Daniel. Next, we have Ashwath Raman, an assistant professor in the Department of Material Science and Engineering. Ashwath's research explores how light and heat can be controlled at the nanoscale to enable new technological possibilities for cleaner energy, information processing, sensing, displays, and communication systems. His research group's interdisciplinary interests include metamaterials, nanophotonics, photonic materials, plasmonics, and new computational and machine learning methods. Fun fact, he was a finalist twice in the competition to be a contestant on Jeopardy! Welcome, Ashwath.
Thanks very much. As was introduced, our lab thinks a lot about how we can control light and heat from a materials perspective, with a particular focus on how it can allow us to stay cool on our warming planet. So if you've been following the news, heat waves and very high temperatures are a major problem, with record-setting temperatures occurring seemingly every week this summer. To handle this uncomfortable reality, today our planet spends a lot of electricity, and therefore there's a lot of money costs associated with it, as well as carbon emissions. Collectively, cooling systems today account for about 17% of global electricity use. And this is everything from your air conditioner at home to the refrigeration systems that keep food cold in your grocery stores, to the cooling systems that keep our data centers operational. So all of this collectively accounts for about 8 to maybe about 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions. But what worries me, and I think what should worry all of us, is that energy demand for cooling is expected to grow 6-fold by 2050, primarily driven by growth in what's historically been called the developing world. Suffice to say, we cannot reach the 1.5 degrees C target that we want to restrict warming to this century if our cooling energy demand grows by 2050. Our lab has been pioneering a concept known as radiative cooling, which is a passive material-based approach to enabling cooling for our built environment. In short, we send heat to space, which sounds a bit science fiction-y, I understand, but the nuts and bolts of this phenomenon is we take advantage of something nature has already given us, which is the ability to reject some of our heat out of our atmosphere and up beyond our atmosphere, and that's outer space. The trick from a materials point of view is not just to reject our heat as thermal radiation at infrared wavelengths, but also reflect all of the sun's energy, which tends to be over UV, visible, and near infrared wavelengths. As one example of our recent work, we've recently shown the ability to make super white paints. So these are some of the whitest paints that have ever been made. They reflect as much as 99% of the sun's energy. And what's remarkable about them is if you put them outside and compare them against the best white paint you can get for a roof of a building today on the market, they will stay colder than the air temperature. Now, that's very counterintuitive to think about, but from a practical point of view, this then suggests that we could actually put this out there in the real world and keep things colder than the hot air around them simply by taking advantage of this passive cooling effect. And it's all ultimately driven at the material level. So some aspects of this have been commercialized. So some of my past work has actually found its way to commercial fruition. This is a picture of a pilot demonstration at a major retail chain's outlet in Orange County. So if you're shopping there, I can't tell you which store, unfortunately, but if you're shopping there, you might be able to take advantage of radiative cooling a bit right there. Beyond energy efficiency, there's been some exciting developments here on campus as well. Heat waves are not just big energy, they don't just cause big spikes in energy use, they are also a major hazard to our own health. So heat is often known as the silent killer. It kills more people than all other natural disasters, yet we don't often think about it. Now, LA in particular has a great deal of inequity when it comes to shade. Shade, that simple thing, standing underneath a tree, is not available in so many neighborhoods in LA that tend to be places where communities of color are located, as well as lower income neighborhoods. So along with about 9 other faculty at UCLA, including another faculty member in the engineering school, Sung-Taek Ju, we received $1 million grant to actually prototype and pilot cooling structures that don't just shade, but actually keep people passively cooler in neighborhoods throughout LA. And so if this is something that's interesting to you, I'd love to hear from you. With that, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ashwath. And finally, we have Assistant Professor Eliza Franco from Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here live today, so she recorded her presentation in advance, which we will play for you. Eliza received her BS and PhD degrees in Power Systems Engineering and her first PhD in automation in 2007 from the University of Trieste in Italy, and the second PhD in Control and Dynamic Systems from Caltech Pasadena in 2011. Her research interests include DNA nanotechnology, biological feedback networks, and distributed control. And the fun fact is that she has 2 PhDs. Here we go with the video.
Hello, everyone. I am glad for this opportunity to tell you about molecular machines and the work we do in my lab. I love this old video of a white blood cell chasing a bacterium, which is that little dark moving spot. So this is a great example of a biological machine with the purpose of keeping your body clean. So engineers know very well how to build devices that will keep your house clean. So many of us own automated vacuum cleaners. We know how to make them because we have mastered methods to integrate hardware and software. So for example, the Roomba is controlled by a small computer that runs programs that direct a motor connected to wheels, and that's how it moves. But the white blood cell actually moves by growing toward the bacterium using a soft protein scaffold that is constantly extending and shrinking based on chemical information it receives from the outside, the chemical signals released by the bacterium. So what is software and what is hardware here? This is a very challenging problem. And on top of that, we're faced with issues of scale. The white blood cell is really small relative to the Roomba. It's more or less like comparing a tiny piece of pasta with the Leaning Tower of Pisa. So given how, this problem of programming molecular robots and machines, how hard it is, our group is trying to address some of these challenges that I mentioned by building molecular machines using DNA and RNA. You probably know about the role of these molecules in biology. They're the molecules of life that store information about who you are. But in our work, we forget about their biological functions. We use them simply as tiny molecular materials like polymers that can be designed to assemble using the well-known ATCG base pairing rules. So we use synthetic DNA and RNA to make small objects, as well as the equivalent of sensors and circuits. Here, for example, I'm showing you the DNA version of a pair of tweezers and the DNA version of a small Lego tile. These objects are built out of helices by programming their base pairs and by joining these objects to other DNA or RNA molecules, we can make them move or grow into bigger objects. One of our first projects was to show how to connect a biochemical oscillator to open and close these molecular tweezers repeatedly, like you would use a motor to open and close an automated door. And more recently, we have used DNA tiles, those Lego bricks, to build soft scaffolds inside droplets, trying to mimic the soft scaffold of the white blood cell that I showed you before. Except this is all built from scratch using DNA. And another advantage of these DNA parts is that they're much smaller than the white blood cells. So scale here is to our advantage. And these DNA parts are actually cheap and easy to manufacture. So thanks to the ease of programming DNA and RNA, our overall goal is to build more complex molecular robots and materials that can monitor and potentially repair your body, like the tiny Voyagers that Isaac Asimov imagined in Fantastic Voyage. So I hope these ideas have inspired you to learn more about DNA nanotechnology and its visionary applications. And with that, I thank you for your attention, and I hope to meet you in person at one of the next reunions.
Well, thank you to all of our faculty members who joined us today to share their thoughts on what the future of the fields might look like. Our colleagues from External Affairs have selected one question for our faculty members presenting, and these are great questions worthy of very long responses. But in order to have our breakout rooms, we can't have very long responses. So even though they're excellent questions, please try to keep your responses very brief. So first of all, for Sanjay, if plants are part of the process to filter the surface water, what are the challenges that might impact the plants?
Yes, I think, place like California, the how much water that we have is going to detect whether plants will survive in the roadside. So that's why the solar infrastructure came in here, because to maintain the solar panels, which will accumulate a lot of dust and its efficiency will decrease. So naturally they have to be irrigated. And that water, once irrigated, is going to be lost unless you put plants below it. So it's kind of integrated system where we wanted to put the plants that can survive with low water, but whatever water they need, that will come from just cleaning the solar panels. But that's the plant is the basic part of most of the design, and it's a challenge. We change the material such a way that it can capture that water for plants.
Great, thank you. Now a question for Samanvai. Are you able to implement pilot programs with industry or on campus?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and that is, in fact, one of the directions in which our department is making a significant effort is to build on a relationship with industries in the LA region as well as in California and across the country. So we do have projects going on in our department. I can tell you one project that I'm working on in our group where we are working with Cal Recycle and the Mattress Recycling Council, which is a consortium of many mattress manufacturing companies on how do we recycle polyurethane foams, which are basically the foam that is present in your mattresses. So yes, there is a lot of work going on in the department, in the individual groups, research groups.
Great, thank you. Question for Omid. Could this technology be used in external agricultural environments?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, we are looking at that. So where you are installing a reader on a drone and drone flies on the whole farm and scan.
Awesome. Okay, and question for June. Can my clothing someday recharge my phone?
Yeah, sure. We have this kind of demonstration. So we have a textile with a size of 5 centimeter by 4 centimeter under one sun condition. It could charge your cell phone directly. I didn't put a video, but actually in the paper, if you look at the supplementary video, we have a way to demonstrate that this kind of textile could directly charge your cell phone.
Excellent. Okay, question for Clarice. Could quantum biology impact drug delivery, for example?
Yes, I think quantum biology could impact a lot of things and could maybe fundamentally change the way we do therapies. For example, and I have my props, my favorite flavor of quantum biology is spin. Spin is a merely quantum property that doesn't have a classical equivalent, and some atomic nuclei and electrons, they have spins. Spins are usually represented by an arrow, and spin up or spin down just mean different energy levels of this property called spin. And spin measures how well a particle interacts with magnetic fields. There are many chemical reactions that are spin dependent. This means that they continue through one branch if the spin is up, and they continue through another branch if the spin is down. So if you have control at the top of a chemical reaction very fast on which spin you have, and this you can do with high-tech magnets. Basically, you can actually alter macroscopically the final products of such a chemical reaction. So I think it might not only influence drug delivery, but ways of treatment, right? How you might actually change in a non-invasive way chemical pathways.
Excellent, thank you. And for Ashwath, about climate change, many of us worry it is too late. Is technological innovation moving fast enough to battle climate change? And if not, what can we do?
So that's a heavy question. I think there's a lot of perspectives on this. I'd say, there's you'll see a lot of people these days focusing simultaneously from a technological point of view on things that can both reduce emissions, but also allow us to adapt and live on a more uncomfortable planet, at least from our perspective today. And so historically, that's been viewed somewhat in tension. I don't think it necessarily needs to be. For example, our own work, I think, has clear mitigation benefits, right? You reduce carbon emissions today, but it would also allow us to be more comfortable and live on a planet that is inevitably going to get warmer. It's just a question of how much.
Great. Yeah, thank you. And final question for Daniel. Can you describe how computational medicine might also impact outcomes for stroke patients?
Yeah, I think one of the major challenges for stroke patients is recovery and how much function they can regain after their injury. One thing we're looking at using computational techniques is the locations of different lesions that the location in the brain of different lesions these stroke patients are developing, and how that can influence telerehabilitation. And we're looking at various apps and games people can do for telerehabilitation at home that might be better, more tuned to them as an individual, and better than visiting a hospital a few times.
Yeah, that sounds much better. Thank you. So that wraps up the time we have for Q&A. Thank you, everyone.